Here we go. Welcome back. John Alcoholic.
Hi, John.
So how's everybody doing so far, right? Not too painful? Resentment inventory, fear inventory.
Moment of silence.
Let's get a moment of silence so we can get recentered and continue on this work, as valuable as it is. Amen. Welcome back. So this, like I said, I've done this workshop a lot, and this is the kind of section where I get kind of the most bounce back and feedback, and there's a lot of different great ways to do the sex inventory. And if your sponsors had you do it differently, I don't disagree, nor will I. But there are some key questions and some key things that have to happen in here, and how we do them. You know, again, it's not how be the issue, right? Let's answer these questions. Let's do what Bill's talking about. There's four big questions in here, and the 4-column inventory worked really well with the resentments. So we're going to apply the same methodology, right? I know Bill didn't do it. Put your hand down, right? But this is how we're going to do it. No hands went up. But let's flip a couple pages forward and make 4 columns again. It's just a really simple, easy way to do it. Flip a couple pages, just split them in half. Number them 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right. It's funny, I was doing this work for the first time this way, and I had one of those little pocket big books, you know, the little leather covers, and I was taking a meeting into an institution and having a great time, and when we left, I put my little mini big book on top of my Jeep, you know, hardtop Jeep, and I left it there, and I drove all the way home, and then the next morning I drove to a noon meeting in the rain, and then at the noon meeting I went to go get my big book, and I was like, where is my big book? I can't find my little big book. And so I looked on the top of the roof, and there it was, all balled up and rolled up. The leather corner had caught in the roof rack, and it was balled up like a wet newspaper. And I took all the pages out. You know how we get about our big book, silly, right? Like, this is my magic big book. Like, the other ones don't say the same stuff. And I put a brick on top of it, and I finally got it all leveled out. And I went to go open it and was finishing my 4th step, and every page was there, but page 69. And so I said to my sponsor, I think this is divine guidance that I don't have to do this part of the inventory. And he didn't buy it. But this is really when we want to, you know, if you're a guy like I am, you really want to hide this, you know, from people who don't want to read it and who shouldn't read it. Middle of 69, that first full paragraph where Scott left off, we reviewed our conduct over the years past. Again, here's a general instruction, you know, a path that we're going to take. All these inventories start with that. And there's 4 questions here. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? That's a question. Whom had we hurt? That's a question. Do we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? That's a question. Where are we at fault? What should we have done instead? That's a question. We got this all down on paper and looked at it. Scott's bursting at the seams here, waiting to...
No, I can't wait to see what you do.
Well, you know what I do. So these 4 questions, you know, I think obviously have to be answered, and Bill tells us to get it down on paper. So let's put them in order. The first question in this first column that we're going to put is whom had we hurt? And here I ask my guys to list every. You know, this is not a confession process. Because someone's name gets on this list does not mean we've done anything wrong. You know, this is just, let's inventory these relationships and see where we've gone astray. What could we have done different? You know, because this is one of these things that block us, right? This guilt, shame, and remorse in our sex conduct. So and we don't need to skip a line. We just write down the names. Every person we've ever had a sexual encounter with, man, child, computer screen, you know, whatever it is. Write these names down. Farm animals too. Yes, I forgot we're in Tennessee. I forgot to mention that. So that column 1 is whom, right? And when it says whom did we hurt, by writing that name doesn't mean that we've hurt them. We just are putting them down there to examine it. And this is usually when we get the question, well, I don't remember her name. That's fine. Cute chick in blue dress from the bar. That's fine. Put it down. So let's take a second here and write some names down. And this is,
If you're sitting next to your significant other, I'd like to suggest you move to another table or take a pass here. As funny as that might sound, I couldn't be more serious.
Jeremiah, you need a second notebook? So let's take a second and get some names down. We reviewed our conduct over the years past. I'm just saying. So start at the beginning. All right, we got the idea there. We got a couple names down. Here's the next question. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? So on the top of column 2, let's write those 3 words down. Selfish, dishonest, and inconsiderate. So in this relationship with your current significant other, were we selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Don't explain the whole situation. I was really selfish. I ate the last donut. I didn't make coffee. I've been selfish in this relationship. Yes, I've been dishonest in this relationship. Yes, I've been inconsiderate in this relationship. So it's a pretty easy multiple choice question for each of the relationships. Let's take a second and jot those down for the 5, 6, or 7, or 350 names that you have down. I love how many people are jotting. You guys are great.
It's very gratifying. Really is.
And again, we're doing this in the park by ourselves. I did mine in a church during noon when nobody was in there, and you got to find some solitude and do it by yourself. Quiet spot. Dedicate this time to getting closer to our Creator. Start it with a prayer. So we got an idea what that looks like. The third question here: did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? So on the top of column 3, write those 3 words. Go ahead.
Those are my tools. Jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness. Did you use those?
Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness?
Do you want us to go down?
Yep, apply those 3 questions, those 3 choices to each of the people on your list. in the other person. That's how I read that.
If they're aroused in you, they're going to show up as a resentment, I believe.
Yep.
It's a good question. We had
Yeah,
a lot
that's
of good questions.
That's a good question. Jealousy and envy are just different words for resentment.
I have a question. Would you just like give an example of that? Like, I mean, like I know what I think it is, but I would like to hear like unjustifiably arousing. Does that mean we did it with intent, or?
I think intent or not is not really important, but in the way that we behaved. You know, did we, you know, not call and come home at 3 o'clock in the morning? You know, did we not come come home for 3 days? Did we, you know, how did we make this person bitter with broken promises? You know, did we create these things in the other person or in the relationship? You know, obviously, if I'm not faithful in a relationship, you know, I definitely arouse those things. You know,
And it's not justified.
right?
So for like a one-night stand or something, I mean, how's that gonna bring on jealous?
It may not have. That's why.
It may
It's,
not.
Yeah, that's why it's multiple choice.
Goodness.
But you certainly probably arouse some bitterness in using her. You know, whatever lie you had to tell her to get her into the bed. Fourth question. Where are we at fault? What should we have done instead? Now, like I said, there's a lot of great ways to do this, and I like to hear what Scott has to say about this. All this information in this paragraph that Bill asked us to look at and put it down on paper. You can divide this into 9 columns, 10 columns, 5 columns, whatever you want. I mean, I see these as 4 questions.
I do it exactly as he's doing it. I think there are a lot of other exceptionally good ways to do it. My teacher, Don Pritz, did it in sentence form. He showed me one of his 4 steps. And he took about 3 lines on a legal pad and wrote about each particular situation. Now, he didn't give me the time to read it, but he showed me what it looked like. So I think there are other good ways to do this. I like the column inventory thing. It's simple. I take a little bit of poetic license in using what is actually the second question asked, putting it first, but it tells me to put them on paper. They don't tell me how. Resentment inventory is extremely specific on how. Calls for a list, tells me exactly what to put in each column. This is a little bit more fluid, and I feel good. I think there are a lot of really good ways to do this. This is just one that I find very simple, as an easy for me. And if there's anyone here who's never done a 4-step before, I hope you begin to see how really easy this step is. The problem I had is I was always trying to take too big a bite. And I'm going to bare my soul to you here. Page 124. I need to do this first. Just about in the dead center of the page. It's showing others who suffer how we were given help is the very thing which makes life seem so worthwhile to us now. Cling to the thought that in God's hands, the dark past is the greatest possession you have. The key to life and happiness for others. With it, you can avert death and misery for them. That is why I must do what I'm about to do. I'm going to give you my 4th column. My 4th column either says I should have told her the truth, or I should have left her alone, or I should have told him no. I'm a heterosexual male, there's no question about it. I had my last homosexual experience when I was 19 years old. Started when I was about 12. I can't, the best I can do with it, my best analysis, and I don't give it much time, is that my father had beaten me down so far that I couldn't tell anyone no for any reason. I was 19. Please observe also that my demeanor has not changed as I told you this. We talk about new freedom. This is what it looks like, new freedom. I have heard well over 100 men's 5th steps. I've only heard to date 4 that I thought were complete that did not include a homosexual experience of some kind from heterosexual males. I sponsored several gay guys whose big problem was that they tried to have heterosexual relationships and it twisted them up. I'm not judging anyone here, simply sharing my experience. If you're a guy and this is the one that's killing you and you've never been able to tell anybody, catch me at a break. I'd be glad to share with you. Be glad to talk with you. New freedom. I had the privilege of speaking with a lady friend of mine who's a former trustee of Alcoholics Anonymous, who's sober 51 years, and I asked her what percentage of heterosexual women in her experience with Fifth Steps have had a homosexual experience of some kind, and her answer is neighborhood of 80%. So you're not the Lone Ranger, folks. You're not the Lone Ranger. And I think it's critically important for me to continue to tell you the truth. And I'm going to tell you I'm going to tell you what happens when you don't follow this, because that's my experience. I became what our fellowship calls a circuit speaker 25 years ago, through no fault of my own. And the AA microphone can be a very dangerous thing. It can feed something in me that needs to be starved, and that's what happened. I became a big deal in AA. I've spoken at all the big conferences. I was a Saturday night speaker in Akron at Founders Day. And it feeds something that needs to be starved. And in 2008, I started getting involved in internet pornography. And I couldn't tell anyone. I have an alter ego I call Saint Scott of the microphone. And I couldn't, yeah, don't you love it? And I couldn't tell my sponsor, I couldn't tell my road dogs, I couldn't tell anyone. It got sicker and sicker and sicker. And I don't think the first step in a bad direction is the dangerous one. It's the second one. Sandy used to say, the measure of my recovery isn't whether I get off the path. We all get off the path. The measure of my recovery is how quickly I get back on. I couldn't tell anyone. It got worse and worse and worse. And eventually a young lady suggested she and I might go do something. And I violated my marriage vows and got caught. And if you're doing something you're not supposed to do, and you prayed this third step prayer, let me suggest something to you. Quit worrying about what you're going to do if you get caught, because it ain't an if question. It's a when question. And let's get out of that business. And Miss Linda, we held it together for about 2 years, a lot of therapy, and just couldn't do it. And she eventually divorced me. When she tells it, she says, we divorced. That's not what happened. She divorced me, and the color went out of my life. My life was in black and white for a couple of years. I dropped all of my speaking engagements. I was supposed to speak in Copenhagen, and I just can't do it. I tried to drop all of the men that I sponsored. I didn't think I was worthy. And 3 of them refused to go. I know that they were getting spiritual help somewhere else because I wasn't much help then, but those 3 men saved my life. And this is one of them. And how do you repay that? And Wall Street Dan took my guns away. He moved me into his house. And Joe Krogan hired me to do a job he knew I couldn't do and paid me for a year. These people saved my life. They pasted me back together. And I would stand out in the field and I would curse God from the depths of my soul. If you hate me this bad, why don't you just take me out of here, with a lot of very creative profanity. And I thought I'd placed myself outside His love. And see, that's not possible. That can't be done. And I'd forgotten that. And it took me a long time. And the simple fact is that I don't have the power to make a mistake so ugly that God can't turn it into something magnificent. Not fix. That's who I am. That's who He is. And I just don't have the power. And I have to share that with you, because if I don't, somebody in this room might die. Because I believe the purpose of a mistake is for me to embrace the lesson and to share the lesson. And if I'm not willing to do that, then somebody has to die. Keith Lewis, do not go to bed tonight without getting one of Keith's talks. He was in the 90s, I think, the best speaker we had. And he said that we all have gifts, and we don't bring them to A and give them freely. We have to go back out there and die. And what are my gifts? And the answer is, they are the mistakes I made, how I made the amends, and the lessons I learned. So that's what this process is about. And I have to share that. And I think I'm going to leave it right there. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
A few minutes ago, when you were doing the list for step 4, you said something about what could we have done differently, told the truth, said no, or what was...
For me, my third one was I should have told him no.
I got that one, but I couldn't...
That's
Been honest. I could have been honest.
Been honest, yeah.
You know, if I'd told her the truth, which was, I really don't care about you, I'm just looking for some sexual gratification, chances are she probably would have told me no. That would have avoided her name getting on this list.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, like our resentment inventory, we've got this list of stuff. You know, so you've got this list of stuff right now that doesn't feel too great and sometimes doesn't look too great. And just writing this doesn't bring me any relief, right? Just like writing down everybody I'm mad at doesn't bring me much relief. Writing all my fears down doesn't bring me much relief, right? It's that prayer. It's tapping into this power. And Bill lays out exactly how we do that here. Middle of 69, we just finished that, what we call the fourth column, and if you call it the ninth column, that's great. This is not about being right. It's about getting well. In this way, in what way? These 4 questions, answering these 4 questions about our lives. In this way, we try to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life.
So that's the mission. We're not here to beat me up,
Right.
not the purpose.
That's our job. Because clearly what's on the paper for me is not a sane and sound ideal. We're going to read through this and notice a couple things, and then we're going to come back to the instructions. Let's notice how many times he mentions this ideal. In this way, we try to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. We subjected each relationship to this test. Was it selfish or not? We asked God to mold our ideals, sounds like an instruction, and help us live up to them. We remember that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised and loathed. Whatever our ideal, so this is the job here, we're coming up with an ideal, turns out to be, we must be willing to grow towards it. We must be willing to make amends where we have done harm, provided that do not bring about still more harm in so doing. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, we ask God, here's another instruction for some prayer, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. God alone can judge our sex situation. I know you're about to burst. Hold on, Scott.
I'm going to explode.
Yep. Counsel with other persons is often desirable, but will we let God be the final judge? We realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice. Suppose we fall short of this chosen ideal, there it is again, and stumble. Does this mean we're going to get drunk? Some people tell us so. This is only a half-truth. So what it says is, I've got to develop this ideal. This is what I've read from this page. I have to develop an ideal of how I want to live my life. And then if I violate this ideal, it's a 50% chance that I'm going to get drunk if I violate it. That's a coin flip I can't afford to take, right? I'm not going to pass another test of being on the kitchen floor at 3 o'clock in the morning thinking rifle or shotgun. I'm going to fail that test next time. So it tells us it's a half-truth, 50% chance. But if we are sorry for what we've done and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and have learned our lesson. And this is a promise, if we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We are not theorizing. These are facts of our experience. Hold on. To sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal. I knew it was there again. So for 5 times in less than a page, he tells us we have to develop this ideal. Bill doesn't say to write it down, but it must be important. It's 5 times in a page, so I ask these guys to examine what's on their page and come up with an ideal of how we want to live our future sane and sound sex life. A couple sentences, 2, 3, 4, 5 sentences. How are we going to live? Most guys, like me, have difficulty with listening to complete instructions. You know, I take about a quarter of the instruction, and so my first attempt at an ideal sound sex life looks something like this. Well, I want her to be 6'4", blonde, 34, rich, loose. That's that's what I want. It's not what this is. It's not about our ideal partner. This is not even about our ideal relationship, what that looks like. This is about how we need to live, because as Bill promises at the end of that, these are not theorizing, these are facts of our experience. If we continue to harm others, we are going to get drunk. End of sentence. So I asked them to come up with what it is. And I'm going to invite you guys to take some time and do that. And I'm going to share with you briefly what mine is. You can take it, leave it, doesn't matter. And I asked them to share it with me when they're done. And I don't correct it or add to it or subtract from it. But so I know what their ideal is. And when they get ready to violate that ideal in the future, we can talk about it. This is not jive with your ideal. So my ideal sounds something like this. I want to be an honest, selfless lover to my wife. I want to give her all of my sexual attention and energy. That covers all the bases for me, right? I'm not going to give other women my sexual energy, whether it's on a computer or in person. I want to be honest and selfless. If I could do all those things, I'll stay. If I can do all those things, those 4 things, I'll stay out of trouble. Before we ask them to write, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, a couple of things. It says we ask God. We're going to talk to God about sex. Well, who did you think invented it? So don't be concerned about that. And I asked him to do exactly what he said. That the ideal, I had one that he had her dimensions, the size of her underwear, the whole thing. I said, no. No, the ideal has to do with your conduct, given your current situation. Like, if you're currently single, we don't need to know what it would be if you were married but temporarily separated, but not legally separated, but you thought she had a boyfriend, but you weren't sure. Okay, we don't need that one today, Stanley. Well, let's get the word today into this. And very simply, what do you think God would have you do / not do in this category? 2 or 3 lines. It's not long. It's not long. So I'd like to suggest, if I could, since it said here that we ask God to mold our ideals, let's all take about a moment of silence and do that. And those who are so inclined might want to write theirs, and then we'll talk about some of the ones that we've seen. Amen. So those who are so inclined, if you want to go ahead and write, we'll give you just a moment or two. I would like to share one with you that a sponsee called, that a sponsee of his sponsee had. His ideal was he was going to continue to sleep with the 2 married women in his neighborhood and hope his wife didn't find out. That's where we started. So I think we probably want to do some work on that one. That's don't want to be the arbiter, but that's moving toward a drink. That's not moving away. So let's talk seriously about it. Oh, and by the way, we got a question or 2 in here, which we appreciate very much. I hope we get some more. Okay, I think most folks are finished, and it's something you can complete somewhere else. In the paragraph in the middle of 70, it says we throw ourselves harder into helping others, that whenever I got a problem of any kind, my solution is to help you. It doesn't make any sense, but it works. This next paragraph is what we pilots call a checklist. If you have used one of these alleged 4-step guides or done something else that someone told you was a 4-step, see if you can answer that you did all of these things. It says, if we've been thorough about our personal inventory, written down a lot. If this is the first time you've tried the 4-step out of this book, which, by the way, I told you the 2 great secrets in AA. First, in the definition of the program, here are the steps we took. The second great secret is that the directions on how to do a 4-step have been concealed in this book. Very, very well concealed secret. A lot of people don't know that. That said, we've written down a lot. We've listed and analyzed our resentments. Oh, we did. I remember we had that list. We did a lot of analysis on that. We've begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality. Yeah, I remember we killed me 7 times on 1 page. Yeah, we did that. Convinced to see their terrible destructiveness. We did that. Begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies, for we looked on them as sick people. Yeah, I remember we did that. listed the people we've hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. Yeah, we did that at the end of resentment inventory, and we just did it at the bottom of the preceding page. So that's kind of an overview on what step 4 was. So you got some underlined. You want to take it from there?
No.
And then it says, you read in this book again and again, faith did for us what we couldn't do for ourselves. Hope you're convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from Him. So I can't fix me. If I could fix me, I would have fixed me. I'd be fishing this weekend.
And there's that block term again. This is not about becoming something. We are already exactly who we're supposed to be. We've just added a lot of, this misuse of character defects. These God-given instincts gone astray, as Bill says in the 12 and 12.
Thus endeth step 4. It's about that hard. I don't let him schedule his 5th step till he's finished his 4th step. I won't let him bash himself into finishing his 4th step because he got a 5th step scheduled. So turning the page on page 73, about 6 or 8 lines from the bottom, the best reason first that we skip this vital. Vital is from the Latin word vita, which means life. So vital is either necessary to life or life-giving. This vital step we may not overcome drinking. On the facing page, more than most people, alcoholic leads a double life. Very much the actor. To the outer world, he presents his stage character. This is St. Scott of the microphone we're talking about. The one he likes his fellows to see. And then down skip a paragraph, it says, psychologists are inclined to agree with us. We've spent thousands of dollars on examinations. We know of but few instances where we've given these doctors a fair break. I was diagnosed manic depressive back before bipolar was popular and was on some heavy duty medication. And I can't tell you, one of two things had happened. Either the prescribing agent had failed to ask me about my alcohol and drug use, or I had lied to them. Now, I don't know which of those two it was, but it was one of those two. And I came out of treatment in the summer of '84 on some extremely heavy duty stuff and fell into the hands of a psychiatrist in Nashville who was sober a year and a half. And he said, I don't think so. And he, over the course of the next few months, tapered me off that stuff. It hasn't been necessary for me to go back on. When I was depressed in 2009 through 2011, this is my experience. I can think my way into a depression. I've talked this year with 2 guys who were in the process of getting out of an insane asylum after suicide attempts. And I said, when I was suicidal, I said, were you constantly thinking about yourself? Yes. Were you able to stay in today? No. And I can take myself into a depression. I've done it by sitting thinking about myself. It's a killer. Constantly turning my thoughts to others saves my life. But this thing I just read, I've got a friend who says that he believes that alcoholics should go to veterinarians instead of doctors. Because the vet's used to trying to guess what's wrong with this patient. The patient ain't telling them, and we ain't telling them either. So I think it makes pretty good sense.
Can I jump in there,
Yeah,
Scott?
jump. Yeah, have a good time.
But Scott kind of glazed over at the beginning of that page of 72. We've been trying to get a new attitude, new relationship with our Creator, and discover the obstacles in our path. Obstacle is something that blocks us. I said this yesterday in talking in the second and third step that I believe we're all connected to God. And I've talked a lot about subtraction rather than addition. And I'll tell you a little parable before Scott goes into the 5th step, because I want you to talk about 5. I love hearing you on it. I believe I got this umbilical cord, right, that connects to God, and it goes one way. When my wife was having our second child, we were in the delivery room, and I didn't tell this story yesterday, did I? I hope not.
You didn't.
And if I did, nobody was listening anyways. So she's in the delivery room, and she's got those stickers on her, and monitoring the baby on the screen, how it goes. Everybody knows how that goes. And all of a sudden, the computer screen flatlines, alarms start going off, things start going really, really exciting in the delivery room. And the doctors come in, they're getting ready to do this crash C-section of my wife, cut her open, take the baby out before the baby dies. And this old school delivery nurse was there, thank God, and before she told the doctor, no, not yet. And she had my wife roll over on all 4 on this delivery table and put her arm out here and put her leg way out there. It was like pregnant twister. And in a long 15, 30 seconds, the baby's heartbeat came back, and the baby was born beautifully healthy, and just couldn't be better. She's down the road in Nashville right now at law school. And before we left the hospital, I asked the doctor, I said, or the nurse, I said, what in the hell happened in there? And she said, sometimes, right before the baby comes out, they're so scared, they squeeze their own umbilical cord so hard that they stop their own heartbeat. Just out of fear, right? Like, what is going on here, And that is exactly what I've done my entire life, right? I've got this golden umbilical cord that goes from God to me, and I squeeze it with resentment, I squeeze it with fear, I squeeze it with guilt, shame, and remorse. Right? This process is just about releasing these clamps that we put around this umbilical cord. And this 5th step process is really, kind of a large part of that. I mean, 4 is a big deal, but 5 is really, for me, this is why I have to work with new guys. This is why I have to have a sponsor, regardless of how long I've been here. Right? Sponsorship is a monkey see, monkey do thing. You find some knucklehead that's 5 steps farther down the path that you are, and say, hey, can you show me how you got down there? And you grab some other guy by the hand and you say, come on, this is where we're going. But this, and the best thing that Scott has ever done for me as a sponsor is the gift of transparency. And this is where the first, this 5th step is where that happens for the first time. And I'm working with new guys that, hey, look, you're squeezing. And this 5th step part is a large part of releasing all these clamps, what's blocking me. This in the 5th step, what's blocking me is my separation from my fellows. I'm different. I can't, if I tell them this, they're definitely gonna ostracize me. They're gonna be like, look, John, you gotta go over there. And of course I had it exactly wrong. So this for me is where the magic happens. This process of what we do in the 5th step, I've heard many different terms for it. Some cultures call this mirroring, where we share our life with somebody. In religions it's called confession. This has been going on since the beginning of time, But there is no greater gift than, metaphorically speaking, stand in front of another man, buck naked, warts and all, and to be loved. There's just nothing better.
Thanks, John. Beautiful. Top of page 74 says that you may want to take this to a religious person. I'm going to share an experience with you. I worked part-time at a treatment center, and one of our patients decided he would do that. So he did his 5th step with his preacher on Saturday. On Sunday morning, the preacher delivered his 5th step to the congregation with his name tied to it, with him and his wife sitting in the congregation. And we have him on Monday morning in pieces all over the floor. You have to remember this was written before there were sponsors on every corner. The men I sponsor are free to do their 5th step with anyone they like, and me. I will be there for it. And if he can't do his 5th step with me, we're done. Because I'm going to hear things in his 5th step that belong on his 8th step list that he's not going to hear. And if he can't have that much confidence in me, we're not going anywhere. We're just not. We know that there are no rules in AA. Well, I think we all know that. The first one is mentioned here on page 74. The last paragraph begins with the word notwithstanding. It says, the rule is we must be hard on ourselves and always considerate of others. That means your mother doesn't need to hear your 5th step. Top of 75, we decide who's to hear our story. We waste no time. And it says we have a written inventory prepared for a long talk. That's different from a long read, I would note.
Yeah.
I know there's a school in AA that says that you read your 4th step. And if that's what you guys are doing, great. It's okay with me. I don't see how reading all that resentment stuff is going to help. To me, there is a single word, a single sentence rather, that describes step 5, and it's the beginning of the next paragraph. It says, we pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating. That means to shine light into or onto. Illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. It is a confession. So he's completed his 4th step. We schedule a 5th step. We have a place, we got water, we have bathroom facilities, we got tissue. The first thing I ask him is, are you nervous? If this is his first 5th step, are you nervous? And it was interesting, the songwriter I referred to last night called me and he was about to hear his first 5th step. And he said, buff me up on this. And I said, one of the things you want to do is be sure to ask him if he's nervous. And if he's not nervous, you're wasting your time. He called me the next day. He said it was amazing. We sat down. We're ready to go. I said to him, are you nervous? He said, no. And I said, we're wasting our time. You have already decided what you're not going to tell me. He said the guy disintegrated before his eyes, started bawling. He dumped the whole bucket, snot slinging. He said that fifth step was over in about 3 minutes. They went on for several hours, but it was over right then. If he's not nervous, if he's nervous, he's either decided to tell me or he's not sure. I'll take either one of those.
If I can jump in real quick,
Please.
before you go on to how you do it. That discussion about do we read a four-step, or I really think the instruction is right there. It says when we decide who is to hear our story, that's our job. We're going to tell someone our story. And that's our greatest gift in Alcoholics Anonymous is our story.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not some magical interpretation of what Bill meant. That's nonsense. That's our greatest gift, right? When we get here, someone tells us their story, and we go, I drank like that. And they tell us their story of the steps they took. And the magic is that now, having gone through this process of getting some relief from these fears, relief of the resentments, and relief of this guilt, shame, remorse of our sex misconduct, we now have a new story to tell. We're no longer victims. The story is totally different. I would love to have someone tell their story before the fourth step and then tell their story after the fifth step. Just to hear the before and after. That's what happens. So when I sit down with a guy, I always show up with their fourth step. To just put that down. We're not, that's a personal step.
To the best of my ability, I would say, and I don't use that term very often, I usually say the best of my willingness. To the best of my ability, when I was in treatment, I committed to do this thing. And I completed this alleged fourth step. Some very well-meaning people. Don used to say, if you take the steps off the wall, you get off the wall program. You start trying to do step 4 with the instructions on the wall, good luck. And some very well-meaning people have added some psychobabble to what they see on the wall, and I wish they'd stop. I know they're trying to help people. But I completed this alleged fourth step. And I called down to the treatment center to Bernie. Now, Bernie had not been my counselor. But I see this confession coming, and I'm committed to do this thing. So before I left, I asked Bernie if he'd heard my fifth step. The reason I chose him is you could look at him and tell he was stoned out of his mind. You know what it looks like when somebody's stoned. His face is real relaxed. He got this dumb grin. When he walks, he kind of shuffles along. You know what it looks like, right? We all know what it looks like. I think I'm going to do my fifth step with this junkie. 6 weeks later, he won't even know if we did it, much less what I said. He's the perfect choice. So I complete this alleged fourth step. I call Bernie. He's in Atlanta. He says, sure. I drive down, do my fifth step with Bernie, and I told him the whole story. And that's where I began to get relief. Now, if I'd been doing the actual steps, that'd be the ones out of this book with an actual sponsor that's one who's already done them out of this book. I would have gotten relief before then. As an aside, by the way, Bernie was not stoned. Bernie was sober over 20 years. That was serenity. I didn't know what it looked like. Because to have this minor case of terminal newcomer thing is going to kill me really soon if I don't get some help with it. But anyway, I didn't know any of that at the time. But I did my first fifth step. And so when I sit down with my guy to do a fifth step, we pray, we invite God. I ask God to make me perfect for this time. I'm going to run tight on time, so I'm not going to it. The bottom of page 13 says I can do that if it's for Him. And it says, never was I to pray for myself except as my request, barring my useless to others that only might expect to receive, but that would be in great measure. I think I quoted, I came pretty close. So I ask Him to make me perfect. I do that here in these moments of silence, not for me. And we come out of that prayer, I say to Him, tell me now the single worst thing you ever did. I want the worst one right now. And it startles them, but they tell me. And then I tell them when I did that. See, in my lineage, we don't hear fifth steps, we exchange. And then I say, okay, now tell me the second worst thing you ever did. And I tell them when I did that. And what's the third worst thing? And I tell them when I did that. And we go a long way before I miss. Every once in a great while they'll have one, but it's pretty rare. And we do that until he can't think of any. And then I have him consult his fourth step and find, what did you find? I hear these people talking about fifth steps that last 2 or 3 days. It's not necessary. The guy is, if the sponsee is in control of the fifth step, it's going to take him forever to go through stealing the Snickers bar out of the convenience store to get to either the homosexual experience or the abortion. And that tends to be the 2 big ones. It'd take him forever to get to them, if he ever gets there. Whereas if I ask him for them right now, we get them. And the fifth steps, I had one that lasted almost 3 hours since I started doing it this way. The average is under 2 hours. The shortest one I ever heard was 20 minutes, and it was complete. We got it knocked out in 20 minutes. all of the things he had done wrong. It isn't that hard once you get it cranking.
Another big piece is when I ask my guys right off the bat, give me the worst things you've ever done, and I exchange my worst things, or it brings him back into the present, because as Scott said, if he just starts telling a story from the day he was born, the whole time he's thinking, am I going to tell this? Am I going to tell this? Am I going to tell this? And isn't present for everything else that's happening.
Good point. I never thought of that. That's great. So when he's finished, I ask a series of questions. Have you been involved in an abortion? Have you physically harmed anyone? I mean, besides a bloody nose on the schoolyard. Have you harmed an animal? Have you had sex with a family member or an animal? Is there anything you decided not to tell me or you were unsure that I haven't heard? I ask him those questions. I already know the answers, but I need him to know how to pass this on, because we're not just doing his fifth step. We're teaching him how to pass this on. And then I read him the fifth step promises here in the middle of page 75, and I send him home to do the second half of the fifth step. And if he doesn't have a place where he can go, I have him stay where we are, and I get out of his way. That he needs to be able to do that sitting for an hour reviewing it. And I tell him, right at half of the time, I will get a call within the next 48 hours of something you just forgot. Do not beat yourself up if that happens. It runs about half the time. And it's not the big ones. It's something fairly in the middle somewhere. Just didn't quite get here. No problem. Call me when you can talk. We'll finish it up. It's not a big deal. And so we sit quietly and review these first 5 steps in God's presence. Have I been thorough? Bill asked metaphorically, using the building metaphor, have you been thorough? And if not, give me a call. And I want him to remain quiet. If he's going to go home, I want him in a quiet car. I don't even want him listening to one of my CDs. I am committed to him being quiet, maintaining his prayerful pursuit to get home and do this, or get someplace where he can be alone for an hour. And according to my big book, steps 6 and 7 are taken the same day as step 5. See, I know something he doesn't know. When he finishes his 4th step, we're just 2 days from 8. He doesn't need to know that. It says, if we can answer to our satisfaction, that's the metaphorical questions, have you been thorough? I'm at the top of 76. We then look at step 6. We've emphasized willingness being indispensable. We now ready to let God remove from us the things we've admitted are objectionable. Can he take them all, every one? And then here's a 6th step prayer. If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. I want to share an experience with you. I haven't told this very often. I did my 5th step with Bernie, and sometime within the next week or two, and you got to remember, we're going back to 1984, so I'm not sure exactly when this happened. I was laying in bed one night, having this conversation with God, just talking like I talk to you. And I had this overwhelming sense of His presence. I've had just a very few of those, and this was really something. It's good to remember it. Lying there, and I was in the presence of infinite love. Those words are so insufficient to describe the presence that I was in. And I was overwhelmed with the realization, as best I guess a mortal can realize, the wonder of this God being. And I asked Him, I said, please give me the hardest training I can stand to make the most out of me that you can. Make it as hard as necessary so that I can be the best guy for you that I can be. I'm going to tell you something. I've had times I wished I hadn't done that. Some of this training has been dadgum tough. You heard some of it earlier. Some of it's been pretty tough. And yet, in my best moments, I'm still there. I don't think I can do it right this second. I don't know that I'm holding on to anything, but I don't feel that closeness. But when I get this closeness to Him, I just want to be the best guy I can be for Him. I want to be the best guy I can be. It's something that I ask each morning. Please help me walk so close to you today that I don't miss any guidance. I quit praying for guidance 33 years ago. I have not prayed for it once since then. I was praying for guidance one morning, and it occurred to me, a loving God is sending that guidance as a free and clear gift every day. I asked that I would be open to His guidance. All the blocks in the channel between God and Scott are at Scott's end. His end's clear. The guidance is here. So I asked that I would be open to his guidance. So I walk so close to him that I don't miss any today. That I don't miss any chances to be of service or to spread love or to spread joy. And isn't that the same request over and over again, isn't it? I think it is. So that was my first, sixth, and seventh step. And I don't think I've done one any better than that. And I ad-libbed it and didn't know I was doing it. Because at that point I was still unsponsored. I had not fallen into Jerry's trap by that time. And then it goes on to say, when ready, that means when I'm ready for him to have it all, I pray this prayer. My Creator, I'm now willing you should have all of me, good and bad. Pray that you now remove from me every single defective character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength so I go up here to do your bidding. Amen. I would observe, if I look at the short form of the step, it looks like I'm asking God to take them all. Not so. Not so. Just ask him to take the ones that stand in the way of my usefulness. And my own experience, I have 3 specific character defects that I call my spiritual barometers. And they are lying, well, improving on the truth, really. Lying, swearing, and my attitude towards those of you who got your driver's licenses out of Cheerios boxes. And if one of those, if I notice that one of those is out, if I look, they're all out. They travel together. And Mike, my wonderful fourth sponsor, said working on your character defects is like trying to dig your way out of a hole. The book doesn't say anything about you working on your character defects. That's a classic example of living in the problem. And so what I do when I notice that those 3 spiritual barometers have gotten out is I review my spiritual program over the last few days. What's my meeting count look like? When's the last time I was in a jail or a treatment center? What kind of sponsor am I? What kind of sponsee am I? What's my daily prayer and meditation look like? I tell you, meditation works so well for me that I have a tendency to stop doing it. Right? Yeah, okay. And by the way, meditation is not extra credit. It's right there in the step. And I go back and fill that hole, whatever it is. And 2 days later, you can cut me off in traffic and almost hit me. And I will smile at you, and I will wave, and I'll wave my entire hand and wave the whole thing. Right. And I'll say, wow, God, thank you that I smelled he might cut me off and I had a foot on the brake and I was able to avoid a wreck that would have been his fault, but I'd have been in a wreck. And go with that child today. I make mistakes like that myself. Looks like he could use a little extra help today, so I'd like to send him some prayer. And I cannot change myself from the insanity, the wild man 2 days ago who was crazy in traffic. I can't change me. As I said, if I could change me, I wouldn't be here. So I don't focus on the darkness. I invite the light in. And the light comes. And the darkness flees because it cannot exist in the light. So my responsibility, you know, some people come here because they feel the heat, others because they see the light. I'm a heat type. And the heat will bring me here, but it won't keep me here. Eventually, I have to be going toward the light. And I think steps 6 and 7 are a tremendous commitment to go toward that light.
Thanks, Scott. I only have 2 problems with the 6th step. The word entirely and the word all. I mean, I'm partially ready to have God remove some of these defects of character. I mean, and I'm really ready to have him remove the ones that are keeping me from getting a mansion and a Mercedes. You know, those are the ones that I'm focused on. You know, man, if I, because I'm really killing it working. You know, I'm making $100,000 a year. I'm working my ass off 10 hours a week. You know, I mean, if I could just somehow, you know, stop being so lazy and really manage my life better and work 40 hours, I would make 4 times that, right? Because I'm a sales guy. And as Scott pointed out, that's not what this is about, right? This is about God removing what's blocking us from being useful to our fellows. I really believe 3, 7, and 11 are all just different levels of surrender. You know, 3 is just this big surrender, like, I got this huge mess, God, do something with it, you know. And so the instruction is, all right, well, let's get into 4 and 5, and we do something with it. You know, now we've got this more specific mess to take God in 6 and 7 and to surrender. And as Scott so beautifully pointed out, we don't have the power to do this. I was sitting next to a guy in a meeting in D.C. in that therapeutic community I told you about, and this guy rose his hand and said, my sponsor said I can't go on to my amends until I get my character defects under control. I slid 3 seats over as fast as I could. I thought lightning was going to hit. I mean, that's just such a scary concept to me. Scott said, I can't fix me, and if I haven't gotten that by now, I've missed something in the previous steps. I had this old sponsor that said, if you're having problems with a step, you got to go back to the last one. There's something that's been missed. These defects of character or sins, whatever you want to call them, they're just emergency responses I learned as a kid to situations I didn't know how to handle, and it became easy to use. But at the end of the day, they, proved faulty. And so I got to find this new way of living. And this, what happens in 5 and 6 and 7 to me, and this is just in hindsight, is I learned to welcome my wounds. I accept my brokenness. I stopped trying to change my. It doesn't mean I accept bad behavior or things that separate me from God. But if I don't learn to welcome my wounds in here, then I will have contempt for yours.
Wow.
And if I have contempt from yours, I'm separated from the hurt. Right? All of this, really, to me, is about unifying us, right? The first tradition of unity. I can't have unity with my fellows if I've got stuff that's blocking me from you.
I'd like to remind you we're going to have a Ask It hat here. There's some blank sheets of paper. And I think I'd like to close with those who are so inclined with the 7-step prayer. We invited God, by the way. I'm pretty sure he came. Let's have a few moments of silence and thank him, and then we'll follow that with a 7-step prayer. Seven-step prayer. My Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here. Amen. We'll see you after lunch. Nice party.
What time, Ben? We'll get
1:30.